future is uncertain, but history often provides clues. In the annual predictions episode, we reveal 3 bold bets for Infor in 2025. Join us as we discuss what they are and their impact on the community. Welcome to Season 2 of RPI Tech Connect. I'm your host, Chris Arey, and I'm pleased to share that going forward, we're going to be shooting these discussions in video. And once again, going to be exploring best practices, developments, and trends throughout the Infor community and greater landscape. Today, we're kicking things off in style. It's a very special episode, our annual predictions tradition. And who better to join us than the man who started it all? Please join me in welcoming back Mr. Keith Wayland, Managing Partner of RPI Consultants.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. Really impressed with the work you've done so far on this podcast. And I must say that it's pretty intimidating. You have like a perfect podcast voice and cadence. So I will do my best to not bring yours down.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the compliment. Really excited about where this podcast program is going, and excited to kick off the new year with this fantastic episode. Before we get into our predictions for 2025, I thought it'd be good to kind of reflect on what we predicted last year. And so I know one of the big ones there was we thought that Infor was going to prioritize partner-centric ecosystem, and there's going to be some product improvements as a focus, and of course, the rise in workforce management as a market. Fast forward a year, here we are. How did things pan out from your perspective?
Well, let's just start by saying I'm glad those were our predictions because they pretty much came true. Infor put a lot of emphasis into not only fleshing out its global partner ecosystem with a focus on the U.S., but in creating better bidirectional relationships and getting feedback and working with our partners. And it's a very exciting time because it allows both of us to deliver better solutions for our customers. Of course, it's an ongoing thing. It's not like a checkbox. We did this, we move on. And, it's something we're excited to continue. I'd like to say that, partnerships are about relationships, right? And in large companies, they're about having a lot of relationships and trust and transparency. But they're also about attitude towards partners in general. And all those things have been very positive on the upswing. And it's been a good year for us and for the partner community. As far as product, I think Infor has come a long way over the years. I think their solution is second to none right now. And, we're excited to go out there and show everyone. And, on the third one, WFM growth last year was really kind of explosive. And it's something that's poised to continue, I think, just based on, the market opportunity that's out there.
Awesome. I think it's always good to look back and kind of see how, where we came from. So I appreciate you sharing those details. And so I think now with that little recap there, we can talk.
Now I'm worried because it's like I'm going to have to be held accountable for whatever I say today a year from now.
You've got a good track record, I have to say. Yeah. So
keep it safe.
We're rolling with the punches here. A year from now, like, you know what? All that came true again. So into prediction number 1 here, I've heard you talk about different waves of moving to the cloud from an industry perspective. What exactly do you mean by that? Could you expand on what you're thinking there?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I think we're about to enter a third wave in cloud suite migrations. But before I get into that, I think I need to give a little bit of context about the space that we're in, because when you look at Infor's strategy, it is to deliver business solutions by industry specific and focused solutions. And the market that we play in, the one that we pay attention to, is what they call the services industry. And in that services industry, there's a whole variety of different categories. But the two biggest, right, are healthcare and public sector. And the healthcare wave, it started quite some time ago, towards the beginning of these modern, SaaS cloud solutions. A lot of the healthcare industry was coming off very large EMR investments, encouraged originally by the Affordable Care Act. And they moved right on to modernizing their ERP and back office applications. And that wave's still ongoing. but I would say it peaked probably in the 2022, 2023 timeframe. The second wave were what we tend to refer to as public sector, which more specifically includes, city, county governments, states, K through 12, utilities, transit authorities, and they're a little bit more deliberate in their procurement process and their planning, right? So the process to say I'm going to move to an ERP could be 3 years, right? And even though each one of these has different regulations that they follow, they all have some to follow, and it's sort of public how that process plays out. So that's still ongoing, but right now we're living in that peak. And, I can say that whereas 3 years ago, probably 70% of the market that was transitioning plus was healthcare. Now, public sector might not quite be that 70%, but it's close to it. It's the dominant player.
Okay.
So those are the first two waves, and so that leads us to a third wave. And the third wave is essentially this long tail of other industries that fall under services. So, things like companies that provide financial services and, assisted living and travel agencies and freight and casinos. So there's a whole other set that is now sort of getting started in earnest that I think is going to be a lot of the traction that we see, not only in 2025, but in 2026.
Very cool. And these different sectors all have different, needs, right, for how they approach moving to the cloud. I think you alluded to that a little bit there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that they have different footprints a little bit, and they all do. In healthcare, definitely HR was front and center. Resources, retention, recruiting, development, they're very important. In some of our public sector clients, we see a little bit less turnover, though there is some demographics there that they're going to have to work through in the next decade. But a lot of the focus is around finance and financial controls and transparency, right? They're publicly accountable to their constituents.
That makes sense. Yeah.
When we look at these new industries, they're going to be more sort of for-profit, business-oriented. In some instances, they might be more nimble. We're certainly seeing that during the procurement process. And their needs are going to be more nuanced. They're going to have more AR billing. Remember, in healthcare, they use EMR for those functions. And they're going to have businesses outside of the U.S., you're going to see more multi-currency. And so sort of more fleshed out finance functionality. And, I think the most exciting thing to me is we're system implementers, but we're always curious about organizations, the business that they're in and how they operate and how they run it. And, from how do they get supplies to manage their people, to their finances, to their reporting requirements. And, I think it's fun for our team to get a chance to learn some new businesses. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. It's really interesting to see too, how Infor has created an ERP that supports these different organizations, despite their, different industries that they work in. Like, that speaks volumes, I think, about the product itself. And it's something that I know that they really dialed in on this past year, at like Velocity and Connect, speaking about their focus on industry specificity and how the application is always being optimized to better support their needs.
So, I mean, I think there's sort of two elements. One is foundational for these diverse services industries, and it is very flexible general ledger, right? The ability to capture your financial information in different ways that fits the different needs, and to be able to report on it. And so I think that's, at the end, just a really core, solid foundation of the entire system. The other is Infor is investing very heavily in its technology, its operating systems, and in AI, right? So they're also trying to create tools that they can use. One third thing that I think has been important over the years that maybe gets a little bit understated is Infor has always been very focused on extensibility, right? So part of being industry targeting is acknowledging that there are nuances between companies, right? And so whereas maybe some of the competitors out there, it's out of the box, take it or leave it.
Sure.
With Infor, you can sort of tack on your special needs, and they pay very special attention to building a SaaS platform that allows you to do that.
Awesome. Yeah. So, okay. That's our prediction number one. We anticipate this expansion, this new wave into the niche financial services industry.
Absolutely.
Going forward. And so now we'll pivot and we'll talk about prediction number two, which I think is tied to something you had forecasted last year. And it's this notion of continuing expansion and workforce management. We saw growth last year. What do you anticipate for 2025?
I think there's a lot of market opportunity out there, and I think it's going to continue to grow and gain traction. WFM, at least in the spaces of the service industry, specifically healthcare and public sector, is a market disruptor, right? It's the new kid in town, and it's having a lot of success because this solution, even though it's the new kid in town, has been developed over 20 years, right? With very specific targeted niche functionality that is important to these industries.
Okay. So yeah, I've heard from various folks at RPI and actually at Infor and beyond that, it's becoming a more dominant player in the WFM space. What role is RPI playing in this expansion of the WFM market?
Well, absolutely. I think when you have a solution that's fleshed out that maybe doesn't have the level of visibility or maybe history in some of these industries, it's about communicating that message out, right? Making that information accessible, showing people what that solution looks like, making sure that there are customers out there sharing their experiences and implementing it and using it. So, I do think that we have a role as educators, if you will. This is what the market has to offer. And, maybe it's for you, maybe it's not, but you should at least be aware, like, here's some very good alternatives for you.
I've heard that WFM is also a really great, Infor WFM is a great solution if you're already in that ecosystem, like the way that it interacts with the various other applications like FSM and HCM. Like, that's a seamless experience, I've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the values that Infor brings to the table, right? That you have the common software company that is purpose building these things to integrate. And again, because of their industry centric focus, they have spent a lot of time and effort to make sure that they've built out scheduling systems that can handle healthcare, public sector, things like police and fire, some of the more complex scheduling that's out there. They're specifically focused on and making sure that their solutions can support and sustain.
Very cool. I hope to see more growth this year and beyond too. It's an exciting time.
Exciting, yeah.
Okay, so now time for the big reveal. Prediction number 3. So many organizations are now live on the cloud. They're having a good experience, but what's going to help them get the most impact out of that system going forward? What do you see there?
So, I think that it's a journey. Once you're on Infor Cloud Suite, there's not only tons of functionality to be leveraged, and, we always advocate continuous improvement. You can't roll it out all at once. You need to do it according to your organization's ability to absorb, support, their level of change hardiness. On top of that, you have Infor constantly at the forefront, releasing new functionality, new features. Like I said earlier, big focus on AI and machine learning. But I think what's going to gain a lot of traction in 2025 is going to be something that's very close to home, which is a yoga for AP solution. So what this is essentially a complementary bolt-on, purpose-built for Infor FSM that helps automate the AP process. And, it's been incredible. I've been in this space for 25 years, and I've been working with AP automation for 25 years. And our team in the last 3-4 years has made more advancement than I've seen since the early 2000s. And the results have been they've been really shocking. I mean, and I say that because, it might sound self-serving, but you can talk to our customers. They're loving this. They're gaining true operational efficiencies that are changing the way they process their payables. And this is not just, hey, OCR. It's also capturing EDI. It's capturing line uploads. And it's significantly improving the user experience. And so when I see all these customers that are live gushing about it constantly to us and to others, I'm like, this is having an impact. And I think it's really reached that point where it's just going to spread like wildfire throughout the Infor FSM community.
Very cool. It's always nice to hear from clients using the application how how awesome it's been and the difference it's making in the way that they carry out their jobs. Speaking of yoga, though, that interacts really well with Cloud Suite too, right? Like it's a point solution.
Built. Yeah. So I think, when you look at what is essentially a very crowded market, there's a lot of duplication out there. And, with yoga, it doesn't duplicate any features that Infor has. It just complements them, right? So when you're importing this data, you're doing it straight into Infor. You don't have to go somewhere else to get your accruals. You leverage the Infor approvals that you're already using and maintaining. It's a very, very specific market, and that gives it a pretty big leg up for that market.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing those predictions. As last year, as we're looking at what happened over the last year and those things coming true, I think it's safe to say that you have a crystal ball for telling the future. And I look forward to having this chat with you again next year. But I have one more question for you here, and it's are the Ravens going to the Super Bowl?
Wow, that's a tough. I certainly hope so. One thing that I will say about the Ravens is that on any given Sunday they can beat anyone, and they're an amazing team. I think it's Bill Belichick that said their biggest enemy is themselves, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Hopefully they can go on a run here and maybe bring home the Super Bowl.
If we look back, a month after this and see that they won, man, I'm doubling down on you with the crystal ball. So
now I'm hoping I didn't jinx them. Anyway.
Okay, cool. Well, we're getting close to time, and as you remember, before we wrap up, I like to ask my guests if they could pass on one piece of advice for the audience today regarding our topic. What would it be? So I'd love to hear what you have to share there for the people listening in.
It's interesting. I read a quote this year from, I think it was Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, that was not necessarily first, but better. And, right now at RPI, we're like everyone else. We're watching all the stuff going on with, AI, machine learning, very exciting times. And there's a lot that's out there. There's a lot to consume. And I feel like there's a mentality of trying to anticipate what the big things are going to be. But, that's challenging. Like some people will figure it out. Some of us might not. What's important is to pay attention to what gains traction in the market, right? It'll become self-evident, and you don't have to be there before everyone else. You just have to make sure you line up when those things start to make a huge impact, right? So I guess my advice would be don't overthink it. Just pay attention.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, it's something that sometimes, especially with all the noise that's out there right now, it's tough to really dial in. But I agree with you. And
it can feel overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming. But at the end of the day, a lot of these things will shake out. And the true winners will start to emerge. And those are the ones you want to spend your time and effort on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Keith. It's always a pleasure to have you on the program here. I look forward to having this chat with you again in another year. For our listeners, we appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with us. It's a very special episode of RPI Tech Connect. If you have questions, comments about our segment today, feel free to contact us at podcast@rpic.com. Again, that's podcast@rpic.com. Until next time, this is RPI Tech Connect. Take care.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate the opportunity. Love the video concept, love the background, and I wish you a great year on this podcast.
Thank you, sir.